Thanks for coming. Again this year, music and art have borne the brunts to meet the budget cuts required by the schools for their budget. Chapter 70 funds may help to restore some of those cuts. However, the policy of the schools has been to cut music and art before math and science. Is this a policy that you agree with?
Well, I think I get the question first. Thanks for the tough question to start, Frank, and thank you all for having us. I think that this is a very difficult decision that the school board has to make, and I wish that the school committee didn't have to make that decision. We heard earlier about some long-range forecasting and plans that are needed for our town, and I think that we need to do a better job of that 3 to 5 year plan and looking ahead and when we need to time our overrides and when we need to cut back so that we don't have to make teacher cuts. I think it's unfortunate that we're faced with this question this year when we knew that we were going to have this deficit, and I think it's almost a shame that we're looking at the free cash the way that we are because it gave us a false sense of security this year, and I hope we're not faced with that same problem next year, or else people will say, oh, maybe we shouldn't have an override this year because we have free cash. I think we need to make a commitment to our students and to our teachers and not put ourselves in a position where we need to make cuts. But to answer your question more directly, I do not like cutting art and music. I would need to know a little bit more about what is mandated and how much time students need to have in those science classes before I can answer that question fully.
Sheila?
Yep. Well, first of all, just to say, I know as of today that all the cuts that were proposed are back in, with the $120,000 that are going back into the budget. The time of 45 minutes of music to 30 is back to 45. Fifth grade chorus is back, that was once cut. So we're at the same level of music classes that for next year that we were this year. So that's a good thing. However, after being in the schools for so many years and going through lots of budget presentations and being a town meeting member for 10 years, the schools are always the largest budget because every year you can do the best you can with censuses and figuring out how many people will be coming in, but you don't know when kids come in how many people are going to have to be on IEPs, how many services students are going to need, and you have to meet those needs of the students. And I feel like when the tough decisions need to be made, and seeing the cuts that were made this year, that although again you don't want to cut any art in music, my daughter, who is a freshman at the high school and a big musical theater person at both Pierce and the high school, and a big choir advocate, there was no fifth grade chorus. There was 30 minutes of music. We had art at that time every other week. We had library also every other week. Things that they have now, they didn't have then. It was unfortunate. But when you have to make tough decisions, when the Warren Committee goes to you and says, listen, you have to cut $500,000, you have to do what they tell you. You have to say, this is your budget. You have to turn in a budget with $500,000 less than what you have now. And a school committee member needs to make tough decisions about, it's not something you want to do, but as a leader on the committee, those are the things that you're there to do, to bring perspective, to say, well, if we have to cut, where do we cut? And my feeling is that, this is how I put it. Last year when there were cuts, the same proposed cuts were to music and art. And the other big thing that they bring up is that they would break the team approach at the middle school. Well, and they were going to possibly lose a science teacher. My whole thing is, in the community, as much as I love art and music in the schools, I can find art and music lessons for my children a lot easier than I can have them go into like a biochemistry lab and do that. So when you need to make tough decisions, it's not like it would be totally eliminated, but I find that the academics has to come first, because I don't think that the parent community can support those things for the children where in the arts they could.
LeeMichael, obviously Sheila went over, so...
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
You can time me if you want. Yeah.
I should have mentioned again that the answers are to a minute. So, LeeMichael, do you want to
Thanks for the opportunity, Bernie. I think Sheila makes some good points, and I'll just add to that that I think that the Milton Public Schools are great, and one of the reasons that they're great is that we offer so much in the way of extracurricular activities, in the way of elective courses, a lot of those in art and music, and if we start nibbling away at the edges without planning in advance how to protect those programs, then we're going to start falling behind. And I want to make sure that Milton Public Schools maintain their edge and continue to improve. So I want to protect those programs. Thank you.
Who's got the next question?
I will.
Matt?
How do you both feel about user fees? Right now, user fees seem to be going up constantly. And I do think they have great programs. But the cost to the parents and to the children is going up and up.
Yes, as someone who just paid $300 for my daughter to play spring tennis, I know what you're talking about. But again, in Milton, when you're faced with the budget cut, if you go out to parents in the community and say that, you know, we're going to bring down athletic fees, but cut special ed, that's not, you know, again, tough decisions, that's not going to fly, right? So one of the things I would like to bring back, which I know Kristen Bagley-Jones did for a long time, and I think one of the students last year tried to continue it, was the activities walkathon that they had, where again, the kids in the community do a walkathon in the field house, and if they're sponsored, all of those fees bring down their user fees. I mean, again, you have to reach out to the community and do that. But I think that's something that if I get elected, I'd really like to bring back to help students to bring down the user fee. Another thing that I would like to see is that...
Remember a minute.
Okay, you can give me a time if you want.
No, go
because
ahead.
Okay.
Can't finish it.
That I'd like to see happen is that sometimes, you know, if you reach out to other parents and you'd want to support a student in user fees, I see that a lot of the times in the community, that if the parent community knows that it's going to a specific place more than a general fund. You know, we do that sometimes. I'm on Pierce leadership, even things with the 8th grade social or the 8th grade field day. Those things cost money, but we have always, when we put out the permission slips and form, asked the community at large if they'd like to sponsor a student who maybe wouldn't have the fees to be able to participate in those really important activities. And I think bringing something like that up to the high school level, you know, would be a good thing, and maybe some way to curtail the fees, because right now, as is, it's not going to be out of the budget. It is what it is. That's the reality of it.
You want to answer it, LeeMichael?
Sheila, I'm thinking that those school committee meetings might get a little longer. But excellent points. She makes a lot of
Incidentally,
excellent...
2 of you will be elected.
Yeah, everybody has 2 votes. That's a great reminder. Thanks, Bernie. And I think that Sheila made a couple of great points. I love the idea of the walkathon and students raising money. It's a tough question, and I don't think that it's fair when you're talking about elective choices for students to make. We want them to be well-rounded. We want them to have the athletics. We want them to have art and theater after school. We want them to have all sorts of activities. But if everybody isn't participating, you don't want to be subsidizing those costs on the backs of all of the taxpayers. So I think that there needs to be some sort of a user fee for the users. I don't think it can be prohibitively expensive, and I don't think that we should forget about the students who can't afford those fees. And we need to have some need-based scholarships, and as Sheila mentioned, fundraising and sponsorships. Because like I mentioned earlier, I want Milton Public Schools to continue to offer the excellent number of services that we have.
Who would like to ask the next question?
In view of the snowy winter this past winter, should there be an odd year, school year? Should we start planning for that?
I think is it to me? Thanks, Sheila. Should we have an all-year school year? I think that question needs to be answered at a national level, or at least at a Commonwealth level. As a teacher, as a hoped-for teacher when I was younger, I was really looking forward to those summers off. So I don't know if everybody would love that change. I think that there is a lot built around the school year right now that would need to change. That's a monumental change. In terms of the snowy winter this year, I think that this was a very unusual year. And I think we need to keep that in perspective before we start making drastic changes. I think that the superintendent handled the snowy winter very well, and I think that we're getting out in June per the teacher contract, which is very good compared to what some of the other communities around us are dealing with. So it was a difficult year. I think we handled it well. The superintendent is proposing some changes for next year in terms of 2 additional days so that we can have additional protection to protect us against these once-in-a-100-year storms, which are coming a little faster than 100 years, of course. But again, I think that we're managing well right now. A year-round school might be an interesting solution, but not something that I know enough about or I think anybody knows enough about for us to endorse at this moment.
Sheila?
So when you say year-round, you mean through July and August?
Yeah.
No, I do not propose that.
No vacation for the family?
But just as a parent of a high schooler and a middle schooler, you know, kids today and the curriculum today, it is so much more intense than when I was there and probably than when you were there. It would be unbelievable to see what kids are reading in 3rd grade now, what I was reading curriculum-wise in 6th grade. They are under a ton of pressure, something I worry about. I know that the CPAC committee actually is having a great speaker tomorrow night at Pierce about anxiety in children today, because it is huge. And there is no way that I would want to bring that on kids, that they would have to, that you have to tell them that they have to go to school in July and August. I don't see it would be where it would have any benefit. I think the kids would tune out, and if anything, it would be detrimental to their overall education. So no.
Pat's got a question, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to know how you both feel about this year's override. This year's override is for the medical needs of a former firefighter.
First, just like the 2 candidates for selectmen, again, I've been a town meeting member for 10 years, and I followed this situation when Mr. Pickens' accident occurred, and we've been kept abreast in town meeting of the situation about his health costs. You know, we have to do it because you know, here's a man who's a firefighter for our town who, again, was going out to help a citizen, a pedestrian, and then, you know, gets hit and severely injured. So I don't know how you can say no to it. I think it's a good thing that they're putting together a committee to educate, because in order to get an override passed, you have to educate. And once people understand the given circumstances, I would hope that they would vote to support him, because he deserves that. So I don't see how anyone could say he doesn't.
LeeMichael?
Thanks. I support firefighter Pickens, therefore I support the override. I don't think it's even an option to not support the override, given what the Department of Revenue has told us about how you need to be spending your money on medical bills. These are not unexpected costs. These are expected costs, and we need to be planning for them accordingly. We've been holding up a significant portion of our budget for the last couple of years and not spending that money on other things because we've been trying to anticipate costs and use one-time funds. That's not the way that we are supposed to be dealing with this problem, and that's not the way that I think we should be dealing with the problem. So I'm grateful that the override is on the ballot so that we can fix it. And like I said, I don't think it's really an optional vote. I think everybody should support firefighter Pickens, and I think everybody should support the override.
I understand that we do have insurance now if this happens again with a fireman or a policeman. So, who's next? 02186, my time matters.
Teachers across the I don't know if it's just a local issue, but teachers across the Commonwealth have been critical about the amount of testing that they're being asked to perform. And the argument is that the testing takes away from teaching time, and what teaching time there is directed toward the test. Is there any, do you believe or think that at some point we should revisit the amount of testing that's taking place here?
Well, again, I think that a lot of the testing that is taking place is either mandated by the Commonwealth or mandated by the federal government. So I think it's difficult for us on a local town level to say that we're not going to participate in some test. A lot of funding is tied to those tests. There are obviously a lot of qualifications that we need to meet in order to get some of that funding. And I think that the community at large wants to know how our students are doing and how our schools are doing. And I think standardized testing, although I'm not a fan of standardized tests and I am not a good test taker myself, I think standardized tests serve their purpose. I think that they're a necessary part of the curriculum. I think that there's too much time spent on them. Your question was, is there too much time? I think that there is a reason why, as Sheila mentioned earlier, we're having a workshop coming up on students and stress, and I think that maybe we need to look at ways to better prepare our students for the amount of testing that they need to take. And I'm all for looking at those numbers and seeing if we can decrease them. My guess is that our good administration and good school committee has already thought about that and has it to the bare minimum. But if we can cut back on that testing, I'm in support of that.
Sheila?
Yeah, I agree with LeeMichael that the testing in Common Core is a national issue. Milton School Committee can't change that. And I think that the parents of the town need to understand that if they feel that the kids are tested too much. But like Lee said, there's a lot of funding tested to it. You know, I work in educational publishing. I work for Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, and I deal with standards. There's the Common Core standards, and then there's still state standards that each DOE also writes and wants their children to adhere to in their state. So there is a level where you do need like a playing field to see how the national students across the board are doing. And that's what Common Core serves. I think that the pressures that the teachers feel then trickles down to the parents, then trickles down to the students. You know, and the superintendents also feel it. You know, it's a little bit like college football. You know, what are your stats? How good is your system? So it's that pressure. I don't think it's a bad thing to give it. I think that the pressure to prove, it's almost like why the kids have anxiety. Like, well, my school system does the best on MCATs, or now it'll be Park / Common Core. I think it's good to have it. I just think that the atmosphere of maybe how it's administered could be less stressful to both, again, the superintendent, to the principals, to the teachers and the students. That's why teachers feel like they have to teach to the test. They feel their job is, you know, being viewed. How good are my math kids' scores? How well did my kids do in English? So, but I agree with you, Michael, that there's a place for standardized testing. I too didn't like it. You know, as a kid, I remember the California Achievement Test with the number 2 pencil, and you have 10 minutes, and the clock seemed to tick louder, and you could, you know, start sweating at it and that kind of thing. But kids today, my son just took the Park today at Pierce electronically. It's the first time they administered it. I asked him about it tonight before I came over, how it went. He said it was different. He didn't say it was overwhelming. He said it was different because they have earbuds in, they do everything electronically. I think we need to give it time before we totally condemn it. You know, people don't like change, that's true, but I think we have to see where the Park testing goes. We're one of the first communities in the state who are doing it. So it is a little overwhelming, I think, on the principals and the superintendent and maybe the administration, but I don't think we should totally condemn it. I think that the attitude of how we present it needs to be changed.
LeeMichael, take a little time.
Sure, thanks, Bernie.
It's going to be a long school committee meeting.
Yeah. Just one more word about the setting the stage. If you tell the students that it's a big bad test, it's going to sound stressful to them. And if you tell the students that this is part of the lesson plan, and once we complete this test, we're going to move on to the next thing. If you make it more part of the environment and you decrease the amount of stress around it, I think that there's a way to make the test easier for everybody. And if, like I said, if there are ways to decrease the amount of testing that we have going on, I'm more than willing to look at that. My assumption is that we have it as low as we can get it, and I think that we should work with what we have and make sure that it's as stress-free as possible, and that the students are looking forward to proving their skills rather than getting anxiety about it.
And I just have one follow-up to that, that the anti-testing movement in a lot of people who sometimes choose private school because they say, well, our kids won't be stressed out by the test and won't have to take the test. Most private schools in this area, they look at those MCATs before they let you in. So what does that say? Think about that. So,
Well, residency has long been an issue in Milton schools. The school committee has gotten involved in it in different times. Sometimes the police department has been responsible for checking out residency. Other times, it's a school department employee. You know, how do you think this should be handled? And should the school committee think about tuitioning in some students from out of town?
okay, I'm really glad that you asked that question, Pat. So, this is an issue that's come up. I'm, a member of the Pierce Middle School PTO leadership. And this is something that we brought up to Mary Gormley this year because Mary Gormley meets with all the heads of each school monthly, so the 4 elementaries, the middle, and the high school. And residency came up because it's always something that people are concerned about. How much is it costing per pupil for our town? So when you go to register your child for kindergarten in this town, it's like, I don't know, it's like applying to work for the CIA. I mean, you have to really prove, that you've been a resident, all the documentation. And that's where it ends. So we at Pierce, I want to say, yay Pierce, but we at the Pierce PTO brought up that they now will be, that all students will have to display, the parents, residency upon the entrance of Pierce Middle School, and then again at the beginning of Milton High Public. And they'll have to be viewed just like they did at the beginning of kindergarten. And I think that's going to be a very, administratively, it's going to take time for them to all too, but it's going to cut down on a whole heck of a lot of people who are sliding in and who are not residents when they have to prove it. With concrete evidence. I think another reason that happened with, the reason why we thought of that too is so much is going green so that, all the communication between the schools and the parents are done through email. So if you have the same email that you did when your kid was a kindergartner as you do when they're entering Pierce in the middle school and you move out, who knows, So that's going to be a big change in the fall and that's happening. Mary Gormley confirmed that. So I was really happy to have the Pierce School bring that on the table for the system all around. And as far as bringing students in, I know that sometimes that could, again, if it's not too much on the system as far as space goes, I know that sometimes we bring certain students in for, say, special ed programs that aren't provided in their town, and if they pay, sometimes that funding that they pay us to service their students, if it's not going to impede too much class-wise size, can be a way to get money for the school. So it's something to consider.
You want to comment, LeeMichael?
Yes, thank you very much. Good question. I think that residency is an issue that we need to constantly be looking at, as we are constantly looking at it. I think it's a being solved problem. Some people consider it a growing problem, and I think that we have a lot of resources right now that are devoted to making sure that all the students going to our schools live in the town of Milton. And I think that Sheila's suggestion is a good one, that we look at reestablishing residency at the beginning of a move to any new school. I think that makes sense. There's a lot of towns that require it every year when you begin the school year. I don't know that we need to go to that, but I think that it makes sense when you move to a new school that you show you proof of residency. I think that would take some of the burden off of the people right now who are trying to make those checks to make sure that students are living in town. To your question about tuitioning in students, that happens right now to a limited extent. In fact, Mary Kelly was able to find some funding from private tuition student in order to replace the #1 budget priority cut that the school committee had to make, which was restructuring STEP. She was able to find $45,000 from a private tuition in order to replace that priority. So that is happening, and maybe there is an opportunity to increase that.
Dave has a question. Dave
The
Johnson.
French immersion program comes up from time to time, and before I ask my question, I want to tell you, I'm partly French, I'm minored in French, I have lived in France, I still go to events that, require my French, but nobody is going to get a job using French. Now, other schools like the Academy of the Pacific Rim in Hyde Park have Chinese immersion. Isn't it time to think about offering a more practical language to emphasizing a more practical language?
Oh, aren't you lucky? Is it time to look at another language? I think it's always time to look at another language. I think there should be an ongoing conversation. It comes up every time there's a race for school committee. It comes up when there isn't a race for school committee, and the other times of the year. I think that the French immersion program has been an asset for the town of Milton. I think people move here not because of the number of restaurants we have, but because of French immersion in our schools. So I'm a supporter of the program. I'm a supporter of also making sure that our English program is as strong or stronger, which is why I'm really, really happy about the STEM immersion program that the schools are putting in place now. I think it's an amazing asset to our schools, and I can't wait to see it grow and be offered in all grades. I believe that we have two strong options in our schools right now, and that is something that a lot of towns are envious of. So I want to make sure that we retain that individuality and that we're able to offer those two options. In terms of the specific language, I think that we have a long history with French, and I think that children have an aptitude for learning languages when they're young. We have electives for other languages in high school where you can pick up some of these other languages that you're talking about and get fairly fluent in them, as I did with Spanish when I was in high school. So those options exist. So I'm fine having a conversation about looking at another language, but I want to make sure that we retain the language immersion program because I think it's a strong asset for Milton.
Sheila, a minute?
Yeah, so I too agree that people move here for the French immersion. I mean, people will buy their homes because of the immersion language that we teach. And French has been here for probably over 25 years now. And I think that what happens when people say, well, why don't you change the language and why don't you totally restructure it and pick Chinese for things like that? I do think that would be very cumbersome at the moment on the system, and I think that after so many years of having the dual tracks, especially under the helm of Mary Gormley right now, it's in a good place. It is maintained financially as best as it could be with the staffing. And not only just the immersion, if you do the STEM, you start Spanish in first and second grade, and then it increases as you go up. And friends of mine who have done the English track, and their kids are either Spanish or Latin, or some kids, after they do French immersion and they go up to Pierce, they decide they don't want to do it anymore, and they switch over to Latin or Spanish. In general, Milton Public Schools, foreign language, that and their music department are so above and top-notch other public schools in this state, can't even compare. Yesterday, my friend and co-PTO leadership member, Karen Varela, was saying, they have relatives in Canton, Braintree, Westwood. Again, her kids are English track, 3 kids, some do Spanish, some do Latin. They're just so far advanced in foreign languages in general. And kids who really pick up Spanish, who do the Spanish program, they're in AP Spanish by the time they're, a sophomore, and fluent by the time they leave. So I just think in general, the foreign languages, even though French is the immersion track, the other 2 languages are unbelievable. You can ask any parent who has kids in Latin or Spanish. So I wouldn't change that because I think that they're part of like the stellar cachet of this public school system.
Frank, pass?
Of the issues that have come up so far, you seem to be fully behind, endorse, and support the schools. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that you would work on or change or look to innovate with?
Yeah, I'm first. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think an area that I think needs re-examination, and I do know that Mary and her team are doing this, is special education. I think that that's always an area that needs to be re-examined. There's so many levels of special ed in the public schools now, and I was glad to hear, because when I spoke with the heads of the department, that they are doing a full reevaluation here to see how they manage it, how budgetary-wise, how they administer it, how they set up the classrooms and where they put it. Special ed has a lot of mandates that you have to provide for students. It's very costly. And I think that examining it and making sure that every student at whatever level of special ed they're in, whatever part of the spectrum they may be on, that it's met, and that the director of special ed has good communication with CPAC parents. I feel like that it's getting better, but that's definitely an area of the schools, when I talk to parents of special ed students, that could improve, definitely.
Just let me voice, CPAC is the Special Ed Parent Advisory Committee, I believe?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Just
Yes,
for
it is.
people who may
for
not
people
know.
don't know, yes. So it's the parent group, the advisory committee for students with special ed in the Milton Public Schools. They're very strong advocates. They have a very strong voice. They're very well organized. And I think that I know that the school works with them fairly well now, but I think that, I know, I've spoken to Mary about that, just from the voice that I get amongst my Pierce Middle School parents, and then other kids, the other parents I know of kids in elementary. And I was very happy to hear that this big reevaluation, they have a grant that's going to pay for a complete reevaluation of how it's structured and maintained. So I think that's a really good thing. So thank you, Frank, for clarifying that.
Yeah, I have a question about
I
budget.
think I need to answer
Yeah,
Frank's question.
yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
Thanks. Frank, thanks for the opportunity to get a little creative with the answers. It's a question that I appreciate, and I appreciate a lot of Sheila's points as well. I want to take us in a little bit of a different direction. I have a Facebook page that I've been using to reach out to members of the community, and I've been bouncing my ideas off of folks. And one of the things that I've been discussing that seems to be really resonating with the people of Milton is the participation of girls in our STEM program, and the progression of girls throughout high school and women into college in STEM. And some statistics that have really blown my mind include 74% of girls express interest in STEM in middle school. And when those same girls go off to college, only 0.3% of them go into computer science. That's a sea change from interest to following through. In fact, if you look at the number of women going into computer science, there are less women going into computer science now than there were in the 1970s. Shocking. So I think that Milton Public Schools, in addition to all of the metrics that they're looking at in their diversity report right now, should look at the role of young women in our STEM program and should encourage them to follow their strengths and their dreams through high school and onto the college level. There was a meeting at the White House today on women in STEM, and there were a lot of points made about the number of lucrative jobs that exist and how the pay differential between men and women is actually smaller in the STEM industry than it is in many other industries. So there's an opportunity for women to earn more in STEM, and there's an opportunity for us to really diversify the number of people that we have working in science, technology, engineering, and math, because I think that the greatest solutions to any problems come from having the most diverse number of people working on those problems, and you can't have diversity without women in the mix. So I want to encourage more girls to follow their dreams and stay in STEM, and I think that there's a role there for the Milton Public Schools.
Do we have any more questions, or do we want to go into final?
Can I
If
just
we have
ask
other
you
officers.
too, because you have some great ideas, how you can do that and stay on budget? Because you're only allowed to go up 2.5%. Are you saying that you've got to have constant overrides, or are you saying it's possible to do it on budget?
Who's first?
Not constant overrides, Pat. I don't believe that we need constant overrides. But I also don't think that the purpose of Prop 2.5 was to live within 2.5% for eternity. It was to make sure that the voters had a consistent voice in when services were going to go up or when taxes were going to go up. If the town really wants services to stay exactly the way that they are, then they can vote down those proposition overrides. However, I think that the operational overrides that Milton has had have been smart, and I think it's time for for another one, and the warrant committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the school committee have all signed off on that 2-year plan. So the town is going to see that coming next year, and I think that the way you pay for that is you have a 3-year strategic plan and you have a 5-year strategic plan, and you know in advance what you want to be spending your money on, and you plan accordingly so that those overrides aren't a surprise to anybody and that you have a well thought out and well planned budget. I think that there is money to do these exciting things. I don't think that encouraging girls to get involved in STEM is going to be all that expensive. We have an excellent STEM program that's starting right now, and I think that there are ways to make sure that girls stick with that without spending a ton of money. But I think proper financial management is the answer to your question.
Sheila, you've got up to 3 minutes in your
I think I have to answer Pat's question
no,
first.
you can answer it in your 3 minutes because there's many more people here that,
Yeah.
You love it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to answer the question on
and you get up to 3 minutes to do it.
Yeah.
To do it. And then LeeMichael can chime in again.
No, I'm going to answer her question on STEM first, and then the closing statements happen after that. Correct? Am I
Sure,
correct?
yep.
No, I agree. The STEM program, like LeeMichael said, it's getting more aggressive. Even when you look at the numbers next year, believe it or not, at Cunningham, there's going to be 3 English tracks, which they are now called the STEM tracks, and only 1 French. And I think that's because parents in general, I think the STEM, young parents are looking, where are the jobs, where is the training? I know they're only entering first grade, but it is Milton then. And so STEM is something that they want their kids to have, and it's the program's doing well. It's going to continue to grow. I don't think to bring more STEM education into that English track now, and they have STEM programs at Pierce now, is going to really cost the system more money. It wouldn't mean that you need an override to have STEM in the schools. But it's just fine tuning the curriculum, bringing more intel from the outside about what kind of STEM programs you can teach both at the elementary and the middle school, and then when the kids go up to high school, however they apply it. So I don't think that that's a problem. And as far as the override goes, I too, with how everything is planned out, there will be an operational override next year for all the town utilities, and it will be 8 years since the last operational override. I think that shows pretty good fiscal responsibility, personally. So the problem with it is that people need to be educated. When people buy their house here and young parents come around, they don't say, how does your town government run? And what is Proposition 2.5? They don't ask that. They say, how's your school system? So I advocate all the time for young families to maybe run for town meeting, maybe educate themselves about how our town government runs, from the selectmen to the town meeting members, et cetera, who the warrant committee is, how that they control the budget. I think education is key to everything. And I know we're all busy. I work full time. I have 2, I would say young kids, I guess middle school, high school kids now. I know it's hard, but you have to educate yourself about the needs of your town. And in a town that only has 2.8% commercial tax base, operational overrides once every 8 years is not, I think, too much to ask, if it's planned out and done correctly.
LeeMichael, do you want to take a minute, and do you want Sheila to go into her final 3 minutes?
No, I'm fine. Why don't you make your closing statement, and then I'll make mine. Thank
Okay,
you.
That's fine. So for people who don't know me in town, my name is Sheila Egan, Varela, and I've been a resident for 14 years here. I have 2 children, a son, Miguel, who is a 6th grader at Pierce, and a daughter who's a freshman at the high school. Both my husband and I have been involved in the town community and town leadership and town politics since my Grace was probably 3 years old. I served, as far as the schools go, Collicott Site Council. I've been chair of their cultural committee. I organized and was one of the founders of their One Book, One School committee. I spent 6 years as a faith formation teacher at St. Agatha's Church. I am currently employed and have been in educational publishing for 20 years at Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. So I work on pre-K through 12 books every day about curriculum. I have a good understanding of what's going on curriculum-wise in today's educational world. And I also am a teacher. I have taught dance here at, it used to be in Milton, but now it's over in Quincy at InSync Center of the Arts. for a little over 10 years now, and I've taught a lot of the kids in the Milton communities. And even though I'm not teaching algebra equations, and I'm teaching people how to do a triple time step, I do know what it's like to have to teach kids, get through to kids, understand them, read them, you know, find out what their wants are, what's needed to make them feel good about themselves. And I think I can connect with that. So I think I bring a lot of knowledge about the schools. I have a knowledge about educational curriculum. I'm a teacher myself and have been, like I said, over 10 years. And if elected, I think one of the things I have, even for the current members there, and I respect all of them that are there, I'll be the only one that has been through the elementary and has somebody in the schools now at the middle and the high school. And I think when tough decisions need to be made, the experience of assessing the needs of all the schools, elementary, Pierce, and high school, with a real hands-on voice will be a big addition to the current school committee. So I hope I can count on your vote on the 28th, one of your two choices. And I want to thank you all for hosting and asking such good questions tonight. Thank you very much.
Your turn, LeeMichael. Up to 3 minutes.
Thanks, Bernie.
And I think what we're going to do, I think we're going to take the library trustees, because Andrea Gordon has come out of a sick bed. And so that's...
Thanks, Bernie. And thanks, everybody, for hosting us. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk directly with you and have the voters see our ideas. Again, I'm LeeMichael McLean, and I'm a candidate for school committee. I think Milton Public Schools are amazing. They are the reason why I want to raise my son, Simon, here. And I want to keep a good thing going. We have highly desirable art and music programs. We have fantastic athletic choices. We have robust AP classes, a great strategy for rolling out STEM to our entire school system. But you ask any great organization how they stay great, and they'll tell you that they're constantly improving. And we have some areas where we need to work. Our SAT scores are average. And we have some performance gaps within several demographic groups in our students. We have participation gaps in athletics, and we unfortunately are cutting teachers this year. I want to work on all of these things. I have the experience and motivation to be a valuable member of the school committee. I am committed to education, so much so that I went back to school at night to earn my master's degree in international finance. I am committed to equality. One example of that is my work through my company, which is a Dallas-based not-for-profit hospital cooperative. My work in that company on their diversity council. I'm a founding member of that council, and I fought there hard for transparency in employment demographics and more inclusive hiring pools, two areas where we have made significant progress. I have finance and budgetary expertise as a director of business development, and also I have performance improvement expertise, including a Six Sigma Green Belt in process improvement, and I've worked on countless cost reduction and performance improvement initiatives. I'd like to bring that expertise to Milton. I've completed a student teaching practicum at Waltham High School, teaching English to 9th and 12th grade students, and I completed the teacher certification program at Brandeis University. I'm a current member of the Warrant Committee, and I'm a town meeting member with an excellent appreciation for our town's budget process and competing budget needs. I have a vested interest in our town, as I mentioned. I'm quickly about to be a consumer of our school district, and I want to get involved for my son, Simon. For more information on any of my ideas or to reach out to me directly, check out my website, LeeMichaelForMilton.com, or look for me on Facebook, also LeeMichael for Milton, or come out and see me in person. I'm having a campaign kickoff event on March 29th at the Alexander Forbes House. I hope that you will entrust me with one of your 2 votes for school committee on April 28th. Again, I'm LeeMichael McLean, and I'll be a strong advocate for students, for teachers, and for you. Thanks very much.
I also forgot my website, SheilaForSchools.org, number 4, so just visit it too. All my info is there. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Sheila.
28th is,
Thank you, Michael.
28th of April.
Yep,
It's the big day.
get out the vote. Get
Vote
out
for
the
3.
vote.